It's exactly 11 after 8 o'clock. Welcome back. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And the first issue of the morning that we'll be tackling is a state capture report, part two. We do know it was released a few days ago. We also know that there are issues that are outstanding, the 10 recommendations by the Zondo Commission. I'm kind of wondering, has that been implemented yet? Or is government going to be waiting for all three parts of the report to be tabled and then forge ahead with all of the recommendation? But let's understand what's come out from part two. We'll be talking with political analyst Sandile Swana. A very good morning to you, Sandile. Thank you indeed for joining us this morning. And we're here to talk about part two of the state capture report.
Good morning to you, Judy, and to your listeners.
So, I understand that part two talks mainly about the issues, the corruption at Transnet, and what was the other state-owned entity? I know Denel, of course, Denel. And we're not hearing about Denel. We've stopped hearing about Denel a very long time ago. And I'm kind of wondering, does that say that that entity has been almost, worked out of the system because it was so corrupt that there's just nothing left of that state-owned entity? Your thoughts on part two of the state capture report?
Yes, the state capture report part two highlights, if you like, the corruption that happened in the businesses, at least two businesses that are owned by the state. One business being Denel represented the success that over many decades South Africa had enjoyed in the arms industry. And I think by 2015 or so, Denel was actually performing quite well. And the management team that was in place was then removed and replaced with a corrupt team and board that was linked to what you can call the state capture mafia, which was led by the Gupta family and the Zuma family under the sponsorship of the African National Congress. The other part of the report deals with Transnet, which is probably, arguably, the largest state-owned entity in South Africa other than Eskom. Now, again, there you see a similar pattern where the Minister of State-owned Enterprises, the President, the board, and senior management were actually working for that particular mafia. And they actually did a lot of damage. I mean, I looked at one section of the report where about 5 billion rand was offered in kickbacks, was paid out in kickbacks, if you like, for the purchasing of trains. 5 billion rand.
Okay, Sandile, what comes to mind when you talk about Transnet is the railway carriages that were bought to the tune of, I can't even remember what the amounts were, ridiculous amounts of money. And they were not suitable for the South African railway infrastructure. Does the report cover that issue as well? I think it was purchases made through some sort of a Spanish company. And when we talk about the capturers in this respect, is it also the Guptas that were involved here?
Yeah, there are two aspects you have to consider. You have to consider that Transnet has got the passenger side, which is PRASA, commonly known as PRASA today. And then we have the freight rail side, which is what we used to call the goods train. On the side of the goods trains, which is what you are talking about, the toll trains were bought by PRASA. The Transnet on its own had 3 purchases, 3 tenders, if you like, of buying trains. All of those three purchases were fraudulent in a number of important respects, in the sense that the the bidders who were well-established suppliers to Transnet with well-known technologies and so on were kicked out, and Chinese bidders brought in who did not meet the specifications, if you like, that were required. And also there was excessive money, prepayment, running into hundreds of millions. I think it was 600 million prepaid to the Chinese, and so on and so forth. So that is what happened there. On the process side, you remember that you had the chief engineer who has just been sentenced, who has just been found guilty, Tim Kulu, Dr. Tim Kulu, had a fake PhD, fake master's degree, fake BSc degree, fake engineering diploma, who had actually matric and was the chief engineer of Brazil. And that has already gone to the court, and he has been found to have lied and committed fraud against the state.
So, Sandile, the important question here, there are 2 points, and that is a lot of the stuff that's being uncovered by the Zondo Commission. I think over time, we as the general public also picked this up via the media. This has just been obviously put together over the past few years just to verify all of the facts, and it's now contained in the Zondo Commission reports. What happens now going forward? Because now it is almost proven beyond doubt that state capture did in fact take place. The guilty parties are sitting with a lot of state money, South African taxpayers' money. What are the recommendations, and do we have any hope as South Africa to recoup all of the stolen monies?
Yes, the process of recovering monies that were paid out illegally has already started, and some success has already been achieved in recovering some of those money. Number two, as you have seen, for instance, with the case, and I'm not saying it's directly related to this, but it's quite relevant, that within PRASA, for example, the people who were getting jobs illegally, such as the so-called Dr. Tim Kulu, has already been taken to court and he'll be sentenced shortly. So the recovery of monies and the prosecution of some of the people has already happened. Some who are not yet prosecuted have already been recommended to the NPA and to the Hawks and the police for further criminal investigation this time, not just the recovery of money. Other people have been recommended for disciplinary action by their respective professional bodies. Others have been recommended to be permanently debarred to practice as directors of companies anywhere in South Africa, and so on and so forth. Others have been recommended for a disciplinary action. So there is a number of actions, and it's important to know that this report, as you and I can download it and read it and take whatever action we want to take about it. So all the affected state agencies are also free right now, as we speak, to take any action that is in their best interest in the light of this report. Use this report to take corrective action immediately. They don't need to wait for anything at all.
When we look at the political landscape in South Africa at the moment, we do know that a lot of focus is being placed by the ANC on the upcoming elective conference in December, which is a very important conference. We also are aware of the deep factions within the ANC, given what a very bad year, a disruptive year, political disruptive year we've come out of last year. Uh, how much of clout do you believe, with all of the other side issues happening in the country, how much of will do you believe will be behind the ongoing uh, focus on part 1, 2, and 3 of the state capture report, and the fact that the necessary people have to be prosecuted and monies to be recovered. Do we have the will? Do we have the manpower? Do we have the policing necessary for this to go ahead?
Yes, I think that there are obviously for the time being some difficulties, but the difficulties are not permanent. The Minister of Finance has got to look at the size of the shortcomings that are there within the NPA, the police, the Hawks, and the ID, and make money available to make sure they've got capacity to do that. Whether he's willing or not, it will be determined by Parliament after Parliament review what he allocates to the budget to actually create that capacity for prosecution. Obviously, the people in the ANC, especially those who are implicated, including the ANC itself, may want to cut down the budget on the NPA, but Parliament will come out. Number two, the private sector has already come out to say, here we are available to provide funding, to provide all kinds of infrastructure for the prosecution of state capture if the state has got no capacity, and the law provides for that. So if the state says, this case, I don't know what to do with it, so the private sector can take it over. They issue a certificate for private prosecution, and the case will be prosecuted by the private sector. Over and above that, there are many private organizations that can actually take an assortment of actions, including court actions, to force the state to take whatever action that is necessary. And lastly, we need to be aware that the African National Congress, regardless of its internal problems, when you look at the results that are recorded at the IEC, Independent Electoral Commission, electoral results, the ANC has now fallen below 50%. So chances are in the next upcoming elections, it will lose support in any event. It will not be the dominant party that it once was that could suppress prosecution and misdirect the security agencies and the justice agencies. That period is over. So although it might take long to prosecute everybody, prosecutions are going to happen, and they are not going to escape prosecution, not at all.
Finally, Sandile, looking at part one and part two, are you comfortable that all the important elements as far as state capture has been covered? Did you were you surprised by anything that has come out in part one and part two, or do you believe that over time the media had covered these issues pretty sufficiently?
Yes, I think that your question is correct. The Auditor General, National Treasury, and other agencies, including the SIU, SARS, and so on, over the years, if you read their reports, and even Parliament itself, some of these things have been properly investigated in many respects. And we knew about them, and the journalists had done a sterling job, and some of the academics actually investigated and published very comprehensive reports on these things. So those people who've been following the stories would not be surprised. But what changes this time is that this thing was beamed almost daily on national television. And the leaders who were exposed to certain parts of the intellectual South Africa, the intelligentsia of South Africa, were now being exposed to the common voter, the common taxpayer, the common resident. And now that changed the game altogether to say these leaders who wear beautiful suits and costumes and are called honorable are not honorable at all. So that is what Zondo has done, is to actually expose our office bearers for who they are and what they are.
Sandile Swana, political analyst, thank you indeed for your insights on this very important issue in South Africa, and that, of course, is the Zondo Commission State Capture Report. Go well. It is exactly 8:26 a.m. News and views right here on Salam Media.